Rose, can you see
Great.
it's on?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
Rose, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So for my presentation, I chose the audience of a number of family and like extended family in a gathering to present this because well, my main aim for this was because when we did our research for um, the different like effects of different backgrounds, I really found it interesting how um, ethnic backgrounds kind of have a lot less knowledge about the SPEDs, and I thought it would be good to kind of share it with, because I'm from an ethnic minority background, so I thought that would be good. So yeah, so I kind of have my presentation that I presented to them on here, and I thought I would quickly run through what I told them about, and yeah, an overview at the end. So next slide, please. So I started off with talking about what dyslexia is because I felt in that context some of the audience may not be too confident about what it even is, which I think can be kind of an issue. And I feel like by raising awareness, we should be able to combat that in the future so that we have more knowledge about these things. And yeah, so next slide, please. So I told them about how, because I feel like in our culture, sometimes people think that it's kind of, it can be due to like your laziness and you're kind of trying to find excuses for not doing tasks the way you're meant to and things like that. But I feel like it's really important because if you look at it from a scientific and like biological point of view, you can see that there's actually differences in your brain structure which cause these effects. And so yeah, so I talked to them about how that is caused by those differences. And I feel like that's important to know. Next slide, please. And then I talked about how at school and at work, dyslexia can have can like create challenges for the people. And yeah, I think it's really important to note that it's not only the primary issues, and it's also like the secondary issues such as like lack of self-confidence that kind of come with these SPEDs that is kind of overlooked sometimes. So yeah, next slide, please. And then yeah, I went through dyslexia at work and how it's kind of the same thing as in school. Next one, please. And then I talked about the importance of support and how it's important to get the support you need in order to, because as we know, they just learn differently and they just need the support to just allow them to do just as well as someone without dyslexia. Next slide, please. And I also went over how an employer will have the duty to make a reasonable adjustments for the employee and to make sure that they're comfortable and have everything they need to feel just as confident as any other person. Next slide, please. And I talked about stigma around dyslexia and how there's kind of wrong beliefs about SPEDs. And so the two main stigmas that I found around dyslexia were low academic achievement and feelings of anxiety and depression, which are obviously wrong. And yeah, next slide, please. And then I talked about labels and how being called like dyslexic can have its pros and cons. Obviously, it can make you feel vulnerable and unable to be independent as a typical individual, but it can also allow you to get the support and help that you need. And yeah, next slide, please. And then so the main focus that I wanted to talk about was culture and how it can be different in different cultures and how different cultures kind of approach these SPEDs. And so from the research that I had done for my essay, I knew that white backgrounds have far higher access to higher access level to diagnostic services compared to ethnic backgrounds, and I find that really upsetting. And I think that we need to kind of, by raising awareness, make it more known and just raise awareness about SPEDs in all different backgrounds. Next slide, please. And so that was kind of a summary of what I talked about. Yep, next slide, please. And so my main outcomes, I would say, were that I kind of provided a clear definition of dyslexia, and like now that audience, so at the least that audience by now know much more about SPEDs than they did before. And it also cleared any stigma and assumptions around dyslexia. And so they have a better understanding of the struggles faced by the dyslexic community. And in the future, if they come across wrong beliefs and assumptions about dyslexia, they too can raise awareness. And I believe that can cause a chain effect, which is kind of how you can raise awareness. And yeah, next slide, please. I think that should be the last one. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I will take over with the question. So one thing I found really interesting that you mentioned was, well, two things I found especially very interesting was one, the concept of labels, which we have discussed heavily in term one. I'm intrigued by when you were discussing with your audience in regards to labels, what were their thoughts when you were discussing labels with them?
So one thing that I really got from the audience was that they believe that if you kind of get a diagnosis, it can affect you negatively in your career and your future and like the opportunities you will be given. Because I think it's a reality that we need to accept that some people just have this misconception, and it, like employers could just look at you differently even though they're not meant to. And so that was the main thing. But yeah, so I told them about how important it is to get a diagnosis, because otherwise the individual will just feel like they're not good enough, even though their problems are caused by basically a difference in their brain structure, which is completely not their fault.
Brilliant. And my second question for you is, I fully am happy you talked about especially cultural perceptions in terms of neurodiversity. And like you said, sometimes there's this misconception that, for example, if you have dyslexia, the individual's being slow and lazy, when that's not necessarily the case. Going forward in the future, as someone who's already had an experience of being an ambassador of change in terms of your family and having this conversation in your family, how do you think going forward in the future, when you meet other people who may be ethnically diverse, how would you engage them in conversations about neurodiversity and challenge perceptions?
So I think if kind of the conversation goes there itself, and I hear about like a comment or a misconception that they might have, I would definitely talk to them about it, like politely, and tell them how the reality is and how that's very wrong. And yeah, hopefully with that little comment, it can kind of give them more information, and they would go on to do the same with other people, and that would cause like a chain effect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Another round of
Thank
applause
you.
for Sana.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.